So recently the Kdenlive team have ported a version of Kdenlive to macOS. In the past, if you wanted to use Kdenlive on a Mac or indeed a Hackintosh, you would need to use a very old MacPorts version. But recently the Kdenlive team have made an up-to-date nightly build of Kdenlive for macOS. Now it's not stable yet and it does still need some testing, but I'm a huge fan of Kdenlive, so I thought, you know what, let's test it out, hopefully maybe help the Kdenlive team and project in the process, and make a video about it. So in today's video, we're going to take a look at Kdenlive on macOS, right now on the Linux Lounge. So here we are in Kdenlive on macOS, and I've got to say my first impressions are actually pretty good. I did have a few issues here and there though, the first of which is the first time I launched this application, the theming didn't work as I would expect it to. I saw some native macOS buttons and stuff in places where they weren't really supposed to be. So for instance, these buttons here, which are themed in the Kdenlive theme at the moment, were using some sort of weird macOS native theme, which looked a little bit out of place but didn't really impact the functionality of the app, and as you can see now the theme is back as it should be. Another issue that I experienced was that the performance wasn't really at the level that I would expect it to be. So usually Kdenlive actually performs pretty well, and in theory it should perform very well on the M1 Mac like I have here, but for some reason it was lagging and stuttering in places where I wouldn't really expect it to. Now when I actually went to render the footage, it rendered very quickly. It was just performance issues when I was working on the video, which seemed very strange to me. But I suppose this is a nightly build, so there probably are a few things here and there that need to be worked out. I would have to guess that maybe a reason for the performance issue is that this is actually emulated. So I'm using an M1 Mac, but this build of Kdenlive is actually built for Intel for some reason. So I guess if they ever make an M1 native version, I would expect to see the performance improve. But as it stands, I actually had better luck running Kdenlive in a Linux virtual machine because that was the ARM build. But I imagine at some point the Kdenlive team will update this version of Kdenlive to be M1 native. But with that said, let's go ahead and drop a clip into here and see how well this build of Kdenlive works. Okay, so there we go. I've gone ahead and imported some footage into Kdenlive, and as you can see, it's in there absolutely fine. Now, as I always recommend, you want to make sure that you're generating some proxy clips for really anything you're doing in a video editing program, because there's not really a lot of downside to doing it. Now, this is some 1080p footage being edited using proxy clips, and I imagine that that's going to be the most common use case, so this is how I'm going to be testing Kdenlive on the Mac. So first things first, let's go ahead and play this back at native resolution and see what kind of performance we get. And as you can see, it's working absolutely as you would expect it to. So let's go ahead and scrub around a little bit. It's not perfectly smooth, but it's not bad either. So let's go ahead and then let's say reduce it to 720p and see what happens. As you can see, still pretty good. I'm not sure if you can see it on the recording, but there is a few stutters here and there, so that's kind of what I meant by performance issues, but as with anything, your mileage may vary. So let's go ahead and just cut a few things and just kind of see what we can make, I guess. I want to have about a minute of footage, so then we can render that out and see how long it takes. So let's just go ahead and drag this back here. Let's play it back and you can see that it still works fine. So I'll tell you what, let's render this and see how long it takes to render. So bear in mind this is some footage with no effects applied, so let's see what happens. And as you can see, it only took 17 seconds to render a minute-long project. So I've got to say, that is very impressive. I do just have to say that Kdenlive has definitely gotten a lot faster in the recent releases, and with the power of M1, as you can see, it is very fast. So let's go ahead and apply some effects and then see how that works. So let's go and add a blur effect. I always like blur effects and they're a pretty good way to test out performance. So let's add a blur to this clip and let's increase the strength and let's just turn it down just enough that you can get an idea of how well it performs. And as you can see, it is very nearly playing that back perfectly with effects applied. Let's go ahead and see if it will still do that at native resolution. Yeah, unfortunately not, it is lagging a little bit, but as I said, there are a few performance issues here and there, but it does still work absolutely fine if you turn the render preview down to 720p. So now let's go ahead and render this and see what happens, bearing in mind that this does have an effect applied. And as you can see, it finished that render in 42 seconds. So I've got to say, if you're running Kdenlive on macOS, you can definitely expect some pretty fast render times. Not as fast as proprietary options, but this is free and open source, so that's automatically a huge advantage. So I've got to say, although there are a few issues here and there, I am very impressed with Kdenlive on macOS. And this is only a nightly build. Imagine how great it's going to be once the stable build is released. And yes, I did try to play back the footage we just edited, and it works absolutely fine. So I guess now what I'm really waiting for is, well, primarily I'm waiting for a Linux port to the M1 so I can try out the Linux version of Kdenlive on an M1 Mac. But before that, I'm waiting for a M1 native port of Kdenlive because I expect that that's going to be really fast. But with that said, that's it for today's little experiment. I hope you enjoyed watching it, and I will see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.